very, very often happens. In fact, it happens almost every single given tournament. A low-rated player, let's say in this case yourself, are playing against a high-rated player, in this case let's say myself, and you would like to make a draw. And there's a rating gap between you, and you're playing the black pieces. Okay. Never make a draw, no. But you would like to make a draw. Let's say it's the last round, and the draw helps you win your tournament prize, and you would be very, very satisfied with a draw. And yet you're facing this higher rated player, and you know it's going to be a very difficult game for yourself. And so it's incumbent upon you as players, as tournament players, as passionate chess players, to create what I call a sweet secret weapon. This is your secret opening weapon, man. And you need this, and you don't trot it out every day. Oh, no, 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 no. You kind of keep it, well hidden, and you use it in those really, really big moments when you need it. And I'll tell you a story that I really like to explain what I'm going to show you in terms of developing and how to develop a secret opening defense weapon. Is in the good old days of the Soviet Union Chess Federation was one of the most well-supported sports in the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union had world champions just about every type of sport you can imagine, from ice skating to weightlifting to boxing, you name it. The Soviet Union had a lot of world champions in many different disciplines. But chess, by and large, got the lion's share of the sporting budget of the Soviet Union. And chess was very, very strongly supported throughout the Soviet Union. So much so that Soviet Union championships, the men's championships and the women's championships, would often be held together at the five-star hotels of the Soviet Union at the time, and very, very good playing conditions, oftentimes in a very beautiful ballet, opera house type of setting. And the kitchen was really good, the food was really good, the players were really well treated. And these two events, the Soviet Ladies Championship and the Soviet Championship, would be held concurrently together. And Soviet players were really kind of treated as celebrities and famous stars, so they literally had their own restaurant that was secluded inside the hotel. And Boris Spassky, the world chess champion, was sitting at his table with his trainer, chess grandmaster Tolush. And Tolush was one of those trainers and these Soviet guys who were heavy and very, very, very deliberative type of person. And they're having their dinner together, and one of the ladies of the Soviet championship has joined them. And she's taken her purse and she literally swings it around in the air and throws it on the floor, and orders a vodka. And needless to say, she had lost that round that day. And to make matters worse, the next day, meaning tomorrow, she was going to play one of her key competitors, and she was now facing the black pieces. And she was in great distress, this lady. And Tolush began by saying something along the lines of, "Victoria, tomorrow your opponent will play E4. You must play E5. This deep, heavy sigh breathing. She will play knight F3. You will play knight C6. Your opponent, she will play bishop c4, and this continues, the same kind of methodical, deep breathing explanation of the moves. You will play knight d4, she will play knight takes e5, you will play queen g5, she will play knight takes f7, you will play queen takes g2, she will play rook f1, you will play queen takes e4 check, she will play bishop e2, and you will play knight f3 checkmate. The woman's spirits were raised. The next day, same setting, same situation, Spassky and Tolush are having dinner. This woman walks proudly into the room like a cockatoo, you know, just like very proud. Comes to Tolush and takes his cheeks like this and plants a big kiss on his mouth and goes, "Mwah! You are a genius. Today I have won brilliantly, just as you said." And she turned and looked at world champion Boris Spassky with absolute contempt and said, "Ha! World champion. With such a trainer, I could be world champion." So, look at that. A nice secret weapon, huh? Obviously, knight d2 is not that great a move, and that's not what we're about to talk about. But what I am about to talk about is developing a secret weapon. You're playing against a high-rated player. You're black. Your worst fear is about to come true. They're going to play e4, and immediate and instant pressure is coming on your shoulders, and all you need is a draw to win your prize and to do whatever success in the tournament that you would like. Well, it's very interesting when you're faced in this psychological situation. You need to make a draw, and so you've got to develop a surprise weapon that will achieve your aim. And one of the things that you can do and should do with the black pieces against a higher rated player is to be aggressive. Don't curl up into some wonderfully passive ball and say, "I'm going to put up my fortress and you try to storm me," because that's exactly what the stronger player would like, is to have a no-risk type of situation where he or she is trying to defeat you from a superior position. Against e4, there are only two types of defenses. One, you attack e4. The second type of defense, you leave it alone. We're going to look at the first type of defense through a surprise. So e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop. Oops, no, that wasn't the move I wanted. Oh, that was because I was showing the game with Tolush. Override, yeah. Bishop b5, okay. So a6, bishop a4. So far, your opponent, your higher rated opponent, is very happy. You've chosen a defense that has tens of thousands of whatever numbers of chess grandmaster games, and theory has approved that white, by and large, is going to have an advantage, a positional advantage of some type, and for quite a long while. And your higher rated opponent, is going to nurse that positional advantage and wait for you to crack and find a bad move, and that will be the end of the game. So you continue in just normal, everyday style, knight f6, castles, and this is why I say we're going to look at the first type of defenses to 1e4, where you capture the pawn on e4, or you attack and capture the pawn on e4. Now, had you played, for example, you were preparing a system with bishop e7, this would be the normal and most well-trodden pass of the Ruy Lopez, bishop e7, but instead your secret weapon is knight takes e4. Well, again, one of the things I strongly recommend when you're developing your secret weapon, your secret drawing weapon, is to be as aggressive and as combative as possible, and there's nothing more aggressive or combative in that particular position than capturing the pawn on e4. Well, theory has long established, for many, many years now, that the actual only way for white to get an opening advantage is to continue by the move d4. For example, if white were to continue with another move, such as, for example, rook e1, or perhaps even queen e2, this simply is not a very good idea for white, because after knight c5, you're attacking this bishop on a4, and after a move, for example, like bishop c6, d takes c6, knight takes e5, bishop e7, d4. Not only can black face the future with confidence, he's simply better in the position. He has the two bishops, and following the move castle, he simply has a superior position. So in essence, what I'm saying is after the move knight takes e4, there is one and only one move in this position that doesn't give white the worse game, and that is d4, which meets our criteria of being very, very forceful. We want sharp attacking moves. Now, at this moment, we have what we call the open Spanish, and the very standard move for black is to play the move b7, b5, bishop b3, d5, d takes e5, bishop e6. These are literally the opening moves of the open Spanish. A lot of moves go from here. Practitioners of the open Spanish include world chess champion Viswanathan Anand. Vishy has had the open Spanish in his repertoire most of his career. Former world champion Vasily Smyslov championed the black side of the open Spanish. Many, many time challenger to the world champion Viktor Korchnoi played the open Spanish. And one of my colleagues, Grandmaster Artur Yusupov, in many of his candidate matches, he too played this position, the black side of the open Spanish. And again, to repeat myself, b5, bishop b3, d5 are the standard moves. Well, one of the criteria is that our secret weapon has to include is not the main lines, but rather a side variation that we hope that our higher rated opponent may not be familiar with. So we're looking for something good and solid, but simultaneously we're looking for something that's very aggressive, that's very forcing, and that's a bit of a sideline. And so in this position, what I'd like to suggest to you, and as I remind myself, this was one of my secret weapons, okay? You know, like when my opponents weren't waiting. So what I would do is I take a pawn. Hey man, I'm 2 pawns up. This is what I would call an in-your-face kind of move. I'm 2 pawns up, and I'm simply challenging you, my higher rated opponent, to prove yourself. If you allow me, I will play bishop e7 and castles, and hey man, I'm 2 pawns up. So I'll turn to the audience and say, if you had this position as white, what move would you play? Any suggestions? Julian?
Rook e1.
Rook e1. Does anybody have any other suggestion beside rook e1? Rook e1 is simply the most obvious human move, and most people would play it. Rook e1 will be our main line. I just want to put queen e2 on the board for a moment to explain why queen e2 would be bad. After queen e2, queen e7, rook e1, knight c6, knight c5, I beg your pardon. If you go back with queen to d1, well, I'll play knight e6, and I'll be very, very happy. I'm still 2 pawns up, and after, for example, a move like c3, I'll play d3. I'll not allow you to capture the pawn on d4. After, for example, queen takes d3, I'll play queen d6. If you like to trade queens, I'd be most happy. And if you don't trade queens, my next move will be bishop e7 castles. I'll be a pawn up, and I'll be doing extremely well. Thank you very much for asking. So, when we go back to this position, our main move is rook e1. Let's see, that's the new main line. Right. Okay, great. Rook e1, excellent move. Congratulations. You are threatening to win my knight because my knight, of course, is pinned to my king. At this moment, you have to understand the psychological things that are happening in our imagined battle. What's going on is our higher rated opponent understands he's playing a lower rated opponent, and he's feeling really good because the lower rated opponent is just messed up. He's got himself in a pin, and at this point we can expect our higher rated opponent be looking at his watch and wondering if he has time for the game on TV, right? Okay, we play the obvious d7, d5, which of course protects the knight on e4, and once again, if we're allowed to play moves like bishop e7 castles, we're going to be very happy. Suggestion for white. What should white now do to continue the game? Knight takes d4. Everybody and his brother would play the move knight takes d4. And it's so logical. The knight captures the pawn on d4. It attacks the knight on c6 thanks to this bishop on a4. Let's put that move on the board. I think everybody would play the move knight takes d4 without too much thought, because in fact there's a double threat. Threat number one, once again, includes knight takes c6, takes on c6, bishop takes c6, take the rook or take the pawn. So that's threat number one. Threat number two includes the move f2, f3. The knight on e4 is a pin. It's clear that you, the weaker player, have made an egregious error and you're going down. You're going down real, real fast. Well, great. And again, I congratulate the stronger player, and I simply play the move bishop d6, and I say, your turn. So at this moment, the stronger player starts to have this kind of a strange chill, a feeling like my duffer opponent, my weaker opponent, is putting up some resistance, because he sees that after the much intended knight takes c6, one ramification is he has to think about bishop takes h2 check, and in case of king takes h2, queen h4. So in fact, this idea of bishop takes h2 check, king takes h2 check, queen h4 is very concerning, because it also works against f2, f3. What we are trying to achieve with our secret weapon is a draw. So a move like f2, f3, bishop takes h2 check, and trying to make perpetual checks is basically what's going on in our minds. And again, our high-rated player is kind of mystified and concerned. I mean, he just, you know, he's played all the standard moves, and you've played this surprising move, e5 takes d4, instead of going for b5, bishop b3, d5 as mentioned earlier, you've come up with a little twist, and at the moment, black is a pawn ahead, and he has a very concrete idea of making a perpetual check. So I'd like to turn it over to the audience and imagine that you had the white pieces. What would you do with white? Yes, Julian? Rook takes e4. That's very, very nice. Rook takes e4. D takes e4. Followed by... Okay. Well, unfortunately, you're faster than I was in terms of pointing out the problem. There is bishop takes h2, king takes h2, queen takes d1, and instead of getting our coveted draw, we're going to get a win. Oops. So rook takes e4. Nice plan tactically. Julian is showing his gifts. But small, tiny detail, it didn't work. Okay. But that was good. That kind of, you know, that maybe our opponent considered rook takes e4, d takes e4, knight takes c6, and then suddenly saw the line that you just suggested and said, oh, geez, now he's a little bit scared. Like, okay. So again, Julian, let's try again.
How about knight takes e6, and then you play bishop takes h2, I'll just go king f1.
All right, very good. Okay, this will be our main line. Knight takes c6. Because in fact, there really isn't much else for white to do other than knight takes c6. And of course, it's the continuation of his whole strategy up to now. And it's very clear, if I play the move b7 takes c6, then after bishop takes c6 check, followed by bishop takes d5, my position's crap. I can't play like this. Therefore, I'm going to play bishop takes h2 check. Now, I'm dreaming. I really am. I'm truly dreaming that you will play king takes h2, I will play queen h4 check, you will play king g1, and I'll just make my perpetual check, and hey, my secret weapon, it came into fruition. So we're going to reject the move king takes h2 as a very big success for ourselves, and instead we're going to try king f1. Thank you. Okay. So king f1. So at this moment, let's take a material count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm 2 pawns up. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4 minor pieces. 1, 2, 3 minor pieces. I'm a piece down. Oh, very bad. Very, very bad. But at the same time, we don't give up. We continue our line of play. We understand I can't take the knight. After king h1 and after king f1, I have to play the move, and I do apologize, queen h4, probably because of your queen f3. So I play queen h4 with the direct idea of taking the pawn on f2. And now, what would you play if you were white? I think, from the human point of view, most people would play the move bishop e3. Does that appear normal to yourselves? This is actually my main line, bishop e3. I don't know. I'll show you what my main line is. My main line is bishop to e3, and now the very surprising move castles. Okay? So essentially what I'm saying is I have 2 pawns for the piece. My king is safe, but I also I have an initiative. I'm expecting that you will try the move knight d4. I will play the move bishop to g4, and I'm expecting that you will play the move knight f3. Let me just make sure I'm up to date on my analysis. That's right. So far, so good. And I will play the move queen h5. Okay, so my idea is, first of all, I have 2 pawns for the piece. Great. My queen protects the pawn on d5, so there's no queen takes d5. Secondly, your extra piece is this bishop on a4. Well, but that bishop on a4, for example, after a move like c7, c6, is not what we're going to describe as a very effective extra piece. In the meanwhile, I may play moves like bishop on h2 to d6 with the idea of queen h1 check, and you're going to experience a lot of unpleasant sensations after this move. In fact, at this exact moment, my best move for you, and you're not going to like this one single bit, is that after knight b d2, I consider this your best move. I don't see a better move than knight b d2, and after bishop e5, I consider this position as simply much better for black. I have 2 threats in the position. My first threat that should scare the bejesus out of you is queen h1 check, and my second threat is that I want to play the move bishop takes b2 followed by the move knight c3, and you're not happy. Your queen will be trapped. So we're going to go back and we're going to say this whole variation sucks for white. It just simply is a bad variation. We're going to go back to this moment.
I'm glad you brought it back. How about just wait for h pawn, h3?
Yeah, well, we're going to come back and go forwards a bit so we can understand where we came from. So in this position, everybody and his brother plays b5, bishop b3, d5, takes, bishop e6, and we're in the open Spanish. I'm suggesting as a secret weapon takes, which looks extraordinarily risky and quite frankly bad for the second player. And then rook e1, the very human move, d5 protecting the knight, the very human move knight takes d4, bishop d6. We're looking at our main line as knight takes c6, bishop takes h2, king f1, queen h4, and instead of the move bishop e3, we're going to suggest another move for white here. Sorry. At this point, also again, keep in mind the psychological situation that our opponent is going through. You know, he's playing this much weaker player, yourself, much lower rated player, I should say. He's expecting you to curl up and die. And, well, it's very obviously you're not curling up and dying. You're putting up some serious scare tactics in white. And after, sorry, queen h4, we're thinking that the best move for white is knight d4 check. Knight d4 check with ideas of immediately, well, you got to protect the square f2, attacking with knight f3. So knight d4 check, pardon me, b5, b5 I think is b5, bishop e3, bishop g4, and once more, sorry, I put it on this board. B5, oops, escape. Bishop E3, bishop G4, and black is getting what he wants, okay? You can put this game and this whole analysis in your engines, and I think it's going to really freak you out when you discover that white simply stands worse. That white is in trouble when white has literally done nothing wrong, that he has in fact followed normal play. And again, white can do other things. Is this the moment where you wanted to play the move H3?
Yeah, we'll have to-
Instead of capturing this knight on C6, the gentleman has suggested, well, what about simply a move like H2, H3? Let me go back here. I don't think I have that in my whatchamacallit analysis. Okay, I don't have, well, let's just continue as if you had played knight to C6, and let's just continue with the move Queen H4 anyway, with very direct idea of capturing this pawn on F2. So after a move like Queen H4, which I think makes a great deal of sense, Queen H4, I'm supposing bishop E3. I'm not really too sure.
Well, rook takes knight, and then knight takes knight.
Right. Now this is a very, very standard kind of tactic that occurs in a line, I think it's called the Janowski variation, the Janowski gambit, and you should become very familiar with this tactical idea. If we go back to this for a moment, in this position it goes like F5, knight C3, takes, takes, D5, knight takes, pawn takes, queen, oops, queen here. It's white, queen, queen here. So the idea here is you have a double attack. You want to take, you want to take. Queen E2, and then in this position, one of the things that black can do is go like knight C6, D4, queen takes, rook F1, and then the idea is after A6, bishop here, to play the move bishop D7. And this is a very important tactic that occurs in many variations where there's a bishop B5, knight E5, knight takes C6. So how does this apply to the line that we were looking at? Well, if we go back and we come up with this move H3, queen H4, rook takes, pawn takes, knight takes, we suddenly see, well, obviously it's quite clear we cannot take this knight, but we have this very nice move bishop D7, which we're going to borrow from the Janowski gambit for a moment. And what the idea here is at one time our black knight was pinned to our king. Suddenly this white knight is pinned to this white bishop on A4, and there's nothing that white is going to be able to do to save the piece. In other words, black is going to win back his piece, and obviously being an exchange ahead at the moment, he's going to do it with interest. Okay, so let's go back for a moment to this position, and I'm going to give you what I think is the main line, and it's wild. Rook E1, D5, knight takes D4. I think these are the best moves for white. I think knight takes C6 is the best move for white, and I think after bishop takes H2, white has won, and only one move to try to gain an advantage. In other words, so far white has played the very best moves according to our analysis. The very best move is, in my opinion, King H1. This will be our new main variation. King H1. And now we play the obvious Queen H4. And it looks a little bit scary for white. In fact, I would be terrified if I was white. I'd be terrified that the bishop is going to come back with check, and I'm going to end up being mated, check mated. Well, white can pull off a miracle. White can play rook takes e4 check, pawn takes e4, queen d8 check. These are, in my opinion, the very, very best moves for white. Queen takes d8, knight takes d8 check, king takes d8, king takes h2. In other words, we've reached the end of the line, and we have to sum things up. I think white is slightly better in this ending. Essentially, he has two pieces for a rook, but black also has two pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So two pieces for a rook and two pawns. Black has what you might say a slight edge in the material count, but in truth, after king takes h2, f5, I think bishop e6, bishop e6, new main line, bishop here, f5. I had analyzed to this position, and I gave white a slight edge. So this was my secret weapon, that if white plays absolutely perfect, we get an endgame that I could play, and probably I'm going to give white a slight edge, but it's not a certainty, and it's a very interesting and complex position. But look how many bullets white had to dodge, right? At some moment, our opponent might just say, hey, I'm just getting out of this mess. I'm going to allow you your perpetual check. I don't want to deal with you anymore. So in this position, first of all, the one and only move for white to give white an advantage is d4. We take rook e1, d5, knight takes d4, bishop d6. There are moves like h3 and other moves, but essentially knight takes c6 is the most consequent. Bishop takes h2 check. Our opponent can bail out and allow the perpetual king takes, queen check, king back, queen takes, and the perpetual between h4 and f2 right away. He could play a poor move, which was king f1. After king f1, I assure you that after queen h4, black stands better. And again, I urge you to put this in your chess engines and confirm, because it's quite a surprise. And the best move, can you imagine in a tournament game your opponent playing the move king h1, and after queen h4, finding all of these moves to gain what might be a slight advantage in the ending? A very, very complex line, but this is basically what gunslingers in the Old West, they had their fast draw. That was how they survived. Well, in chess competitions, your fast draw has to be your secret weapon, your chess opening novelty, where you come with a big surprise. And this is an example of just that, and how you go about making the big surprise is you follow a main line, you find a certain side track, and you catch your opponent with your preparation.